Hello and welcome to this week's episode. This week's episode is focusing on something very special. It's focusing on the aviation industry. And we have someone here with experience in air traffic control that can tell us a lot on what goes in there, and if we do want to become air traffic controllers, what are the things that will be required of us or expected of us. So this morning we have Peterson with us, and he's going to help us a lot with a lot of education on what to do when it comes to aviation. Welcome, Shane.
Thank you. Glad to be here. I'm excited to talk about aviation. Hopefully I don't disappoint you.
So, Shane, can you please tell us about your experience and how did you get into the aviation industry?
Okay, I don't know how far you want to go back, but I can tell you that when I was 18 years old, I went into the military. And I essentially wanted to do something that paid well, but I could do it without going to college because I didn't do very well in high school and I didn't have any money. And frankly, I was very, very poor. So I said, what can I do in the military? And I found something that said, do air traffic control. So I signed up, went in the U.S. military, and I did 4 years there. And they taught me everything. And while they paid me to do it, which is the opposite of college, right? You pay them to teach you. So, so I did that for 4 years, learned how to do it. In the military, I worked mainly just in Tucson, Arizona, U.S., which was a very, very busy airport at that time. And got out after 4 years. And then I did some other jobs for a while. Then eventually I went into the FAA, where I was an air traffic controller for almost 25 years there. I was in California for a bit. I worked in Salt Lake City, Utah as a radar approach controller. And then ultimately I did my career in Chicago as, again, a radar approach controller, which is the busiest airport in the world, again, if you measure it by number of aircraft. So there's a couple ways you can measure it. If you go to, like, Atlanta is usually the busiest due to the number of passengers, because the planes, there's more people on planes, whereas Chicago has a lot more planes that may be smaller, such as regional jets. So as for, from my perspective as an air traffic controller, what really counts is how many airplanes are in the air versus the number of people on the planes. But so I did that in Chicago, finished my career there. I retired on a Friday and I went back on Monday.
You went back on Monday?
And I went back on Monday to become a teacher who now teaches all the people who transfer into the world's busiest facility, and I teach them how to do it.
So 25 years in doing the same job. How does that feel like?
Well, I don't know. It kind of flew by, to be honest with you.
Because I know some people they like their job, but they like to jump between one job or the other. They tell you that it gets boring over time. If they work for the same place for 4 years, 5 years, or 10, they get tired of doing the same thing.
I agree with you on that. Air traffic is kind of an interesting job in that if you move to another place, it's a very different job than that, right? So, like I said, I worked in California, I worked in Salt Lake City, and then in Chicago. And then, like I said, the military was in Tucson. All of those airports are quite different from each other. And so, just the training process alone, if someone were to move, let's say someone is an air traffic controller, right? And they let's say they work in Miami or wherever, and they decide they want to come to Chicago. You'd think that, well, it's just a job transfer. It's the same job, but it's not entirely true. If you were to move to Chicago from there, the training process you would then go through would be, anywhere from a year to maybe 3 years.
Wow.
Just from moving.
That's a lot.
Yeah. But it is a lot. Now, Chicago is, maybe a little bit of an outlier because it's so busy and very complex. But, still, you can transfer really anywhere, and you're going to have to re-enter training essentially again because the airport and its environment are so entirely different.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Man, if that's the situation, I don't think I want to just keep changing between one airport or the other.
Life happens, right? So sometimes you just, you want to live in Montreal at one point. You're like,
that's true. Yeah, well, that's true.
Guess what? You go from there to there, and now all of a sudden you're in training again, and you have to learn a whole different environment.
So as an air traffic controller, what is your day like? Because when we go to the airport as passengers, we don't really know what goes on there. We just want to get in the plane and get to where we're going to. But for you as an air traffic controller, what is your day like?
Okay. Well, for my day, it's about getting a nice cup of coffee, getting in there and whatever. But, so I'll try and paint the picture for you. I guess it sounds like you kind of asked for both sides, my inside my work, and then maybe outside what it's like for
that's true.
Experience. So I'll talk about both sides of the coin here. So as far as work goes, when I go into work, there will be several different positions in a facility, depending on, again, how busy or complex the place is. One place may only have three different positions, right? And then another one may have, Chicago, I believe we have 24, maybe 25 different positions that you could be assigned to when you walk in the door, right? So let's just take, for example, you were going to work the departures off of O'Hare Airport and you were sent to South Departure. So boom, you go walk over to South Departure. It's in front of a radar scope and you'll work that position. So anybody going south off of O'Hare, those are the ones you're working for, for maybe an hour or whatever. And then you go on break, you come back from break and they put you on a different position. So now you're going to work maybe arrivals to a specific runway at O'Hare. So you're always kind of bouncing around. So even just in those little things, the job changes significantly depending on which of those positions you are assigned at a given moment.
Wow. So is that a job that has to do with a shift, or it's a regular 10 hours or 8 hours job a day?
That's a whole nother terrible conversation. So it is shift work. It is shift work. Now, again, this is a U.S. centric. I can't say specifically how they handle the shifts.
In other countries,
elsewhere. But in the United States, it's anywhere from 8 to 10 hours for a shift. Eight is what you would schedule. But then, before the shift begins or before the shift ends, they might say, "Hey, could you stay for another 2?" Yeah. Oh, yeah, that happens a lot at a busy place. And then we are scheduled, usually, at least in Chicago, 6 days a week. So 5 would be obviously a normal work week, and then you're scheduled an extra day of overtime. So right there, you're looking at least 6 days a week and sometimes 10 hours a day on several of those. And as far as what the shifts are, those vary greatly. And this is probably the thing that scares people mostly away from air traffic control, in that, let's say, I'll tell you a typical week. So someone will go to work on their first day back. We'll just say it's Monday, right? They go in and their shift would probably be something like 2:30 in the afternoon, maybe 3 p.m., right? And that's for 8 hours. So they're going to work from 2:30 to say 10:30 at night and then go home. And then the next day they'll have something like, let's say, a 1:30 to 9:30.
In the afternoon, or in the 1:30 in the afternoon, correct?
In the afternoon, right. 1:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. So they'll go work that. And then they'll go home. And now their next shift is probably 7 in the morning. From 7 in the morning till, say, what would that be, 3? So 7 to 3 p.m. And then the next day they'll come back. And now it's probably going to be something like 5:30.
That's insane.
Right. No, it gets even worse. Hold on. So let's say it's 5:30 in the morning to, hold on. So 5:30 to, what was that? Be 1:30 then? So 5:30 to 1:30. And now you go home and you've got to come back at 10 p.m. and you're going to spend the night. And you're going to work from 10 p.m. until, what is it, 6 in the morning? Something like that. So that is a typical week, and that's not including the overtime, which may be another come back at 10 p.m., or maybe instead of that coming back at 10 p.m. on that 5th day, maybe you have another 5:30 a.m. shift, and then the 6th day you're coming back and spending the night at 10.
Oh my God. Oh boy. Yep, that's scary.
Yeah. It's very hard for people to, there's a lot of people, I'm lucky. I'm one of the people who I can kind of fall asleep anywhere, right? And get sleep. There are people that I work with, though, that's
very difficult.
And I'm sure it's very difficult for a lot of people where you just can't get a nap in, you can't recover. So it can be very, very hard on someone's body and their psyche.
So how did you manage your other activities then? Because if you have a schedule like this, how do you get to do other things out of work?
Yeah, so you don't. Okay, so you got to think about seniority, right? So let's say you first get into air traffic control, you're going to have a low seniority, right? So your days off will be awful. So when we talk about those typical shifts I just gave you, probably the worst days off, at least in my opinion, would be Wednesday and Thursday off. So you have people who are off Wednesday and Thursday. And so they begin that schedule that we just talked about. So that means they're coming in on Friday night. And then they're working Saturday night. And then they're working Sunday morning, Sunday night, but they're working Sunday morning, right? And then they're working Monday morning, Tuesday morning, and then they're spending the night on probably Tuesday night. So it's really, really hard to schedule with people in the real world, the normal people who, I have a party on Friday night, hey, we're going to go to a concert on Saturday, or,
you can't, because you don't even know.
You're always saying you don't know, and you can't. You just say, I can't go. I'm sorry. Or, unfortunately, maybe, sometimes someone falls in sick. There's only so much you can do that before you're in trouble or you run out of sick time anyway. But and as far as days off, and this is, you take vacation, right?
Yeah.
Your job. Well, in air traffic control, they're, at least in the FAA, they're generous with the amount of time you can get off, right? That you earn. However, you have to bid those days off in October or November of the preceding year that you're talking about, right? So if, let's say it's March and someone says, hey, we're going to go do this thing in July. Well, you've already bid your days off. You don't have a day off that you can match up with them. No. And if you're in a busy facility like Chicago, you can't ask for time off. There's no, hey, can I have tomorrow off? Whatever they say, it's an automatic no. You cannot, because there's already people working overtime every single shift. So they're not allowed to give someone vacation if someone is there on overtime.
Okay. What is the reward for all of this? Because these schedules are crazy and there's a lot of overtime. My first question for that is, what is the reward? And secondly is, why? Why does the job have unpredictable schedule?
Okay. What's the reward? Well, the reward for, it's hard to say, why each person does what they do, but I know for me personally, the reward is being able to have an income that is much higher than most people. Yeah. Right? I don't know what the average income is these days, at least in the United States. I can't imagine it's more than, $60,000 or $70,000.
It's not a lot, no.
Right? But right. Everybody all around the world is feeling pressure with their wages. It's actually a very sad situation with inflation and all that. But as an air traffic controller, if you are able to escape from the lower level facilities, right? So the slower airports, unfortunately, at slower airports, they do not make a lot of money. Maybe they make 100,000 at some little airports, which isn't bad, but for this type of work,
exactly.
Asking a person, it's not great, right? Right. But if you can get to a very busy facility, like I have worked at, you can make well over 200,000. Some people are making over
a month,
$1,000
or a year.
In a year. Okay. No, in a year, right. Yeah, no. So you can make a
that's nice a lot of money. That's cool.
That's cool. And on top of that, there's also the fact that you get a pension, which I don't know much about what pensions are like for different careers, outside of the United States, but in the United States, pensions are dead. I mean, your chance of finding a job,
it's very difficult.
Is like finding a needle in a haystack. It's just, they killed,
Okay. No,
so that would, I'd say that's the person for me, the reward, the income and the pension and good health care.
Very crucial. Very crucial.
Is straight, Healthcare in the United States is straight up garbage. Just garbage, in my opinion. It's absolutely disgusting. And it has to be completely overhauled because what happens when someone gets fired? What happens when you change careers? You're screwed, right? Anyway, I'm sorry.
It's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. You said something about the activities of the ATC from one airport varies to another. What makes an airport have much more activities than the other?
Well, first of all, you have the number of aircraft, right? And the number of, we call them operations. So the number of operations at a given facility are going to be based off, generally they're based off of how big the city is, right? That they're tied to usually. So New York obviously is going to be busy, and Chicago is busy, LA is busy, Toronto.
Yes, very busy, yeah.
So, right. So generally, just for that reason alone, you can figure out just on that it's going to be busy. Now, Chicago itself is busier than New York, generally speaking, because it's called a hub and a spoke system.
The hub and spoke, I think I've heard that before.
The airlines use. Yeah, so the airlines, they like to come in and out of Chicago, right? So a lot of your flights connect out of there. So that jacks up the numbers there even more than what the population might
Interesting.
For the given city, And then, the other thing would be complexity, right? So some airports are just more complex than others due to their location. So like I said, I had worked in Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City is surrounded by mountains. So that was very hard. Not so much for the volume, which it did get quite busy sometimes, but the mountains were just amazingly difficult to work with. When the airport is in a valley and you're dealing with descending aircraft along mountain ridges all day long, which is a little bit stressful.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So let me take you to your experience in your job. When it comes to our jobs, mainly transportation and logistics, like what you do, we have heard about people who have gone through very challenging experiences in their job. And in the airports, mainly in the airports, you hear about drug busts and all of that. So can you share one experience that was challenging to you in your job back then?
Okay. All right. Well, I'll tell you a story I've never told it. This happened during COVID. So
that was a tough one.
4 or 5 years ago, I was working a gentleman into DuPage Airport, it's a small airport just west of Chicago. And he was flying in a Cirrus, an SR-22. And the weather was not good. And it wasn't particularly bad. It was IFR. So he's flying on instruments. It was just cloudy. And he was going into the airport. He was maybe 12 miles from landing. And I don't know exactly what happened in the cockpit, but I believe he got vertigo.
Oh boy.
So he lost control of his aircraft, and it was probably one of the most terrifying things I've experienced as an air traffic controller, because we watched him on the radar scope. Well, all of a sudden, I'll tell you how it starts. So, I clear him for the approach. He's going in. Again, about 10, 12 miles out, you see him kind of go off course.
Oh, boy.
Right? He's not quite on.
Oh, boy.
A little bit off. I'm like, so I say to him, hey, you're a little right of the course. So are you correcting, whatever. And just silence. And he's not talking. And so, he sort of starts correcting him, going, okay, maybe he's getting it together. But then all of a sudden, he starts descending. And I mean descending so rapidly, as in it looks like he's going to crash, right? So I get a low altitude alert, goes off, and he goes all the way down to, he's supposed to be at this point, he's supposed to be at about 3,000 feet, but he goes all the way down to about 700. Now, when I say these numbers to you, 700 feet means 700 feet above.
That's very close to that's very close to the ground.
Right. So the question is, depending on where you're at, really the follow-up question is, how high is the ground? The ground is not zero. In the DuPage area, the ground is 700.
Oh boy.
So
Wow.
when his aircraft descends to 700, that means he descended to the ground. There was nothing left. And I'm going, oh my God, this is, I'm like, oh, and I'm talking to him and I'm saying, sir, please just pull up, pull up. And well, apparently he does pull up and he climbs from 700 within probably, I don't know, call it 5 seconds. He climbs to 4,000.
Oh boy.
And yep, he goes from 700 to 4,000. And then within about 5 seconds after that, he's at 700 feet again. And about 6 seconds after that, he's back up at 5,000 feet. So he's going, imagine a roller coaster, just straight up vertical, straight down, straight up, straight down. And I'm sitting now, there's a crowd of people around me in the Tracon. And I'm telling the people around me. So I'm having to work other airplanes, by the way, at the same time, so I have other aircraft on the frequency. And I'm telling people, do not give me any more airplanes and take these other ones off of my frequency, right? So I can speak only to this man. And he would, it was just terrifying. It's up and he's down and all these alerts. And I'm just telling him, sir, just level your wings. Just level your wings up, please. And all you could hear from him, he would key up and he would be grunting. So it would be this grunting noise that would be coming over the radio, just grunts, like probably from the G-forces that he was experiencing in the aircraft.
Oh, that's scary.
Yeah, it was terrifying. And then at some point, so a Cirrus kind of has a get out of jail. It has two get out of jail free cards in it, right? It has a parachute. So I don't know if they all have parachutes, but I think that's their selling feature, right? That the entire aircraft has a parachute attached to it. So people around me are suggesting, hey, tell him to pull his parachute on the aircraft. And I'm sitting there going, I don't know if I should say that, because what if he's inverted? Like, I don't know when you should or should not pull this parachute. So I did not say it to him. I didn't. I wasn't sure about that. And then he never pulled the parachute. But the other get out of jail free card for a Cirrus is it has a button in the cockpit that pretty much says, level my wings and fly. Well, apparently he must have found that button, because all of a sudden he's flying level. He just 3,000 feet, smooth as butter, heading away from the airport at this point, but he's level and he's going, okay, I'm okay now. And I said, hey man,
that's worrying. That's a lot. That's too much.
Yeah. And he says, I'm ready to go land at the airport now. I said, why don't we just take a time? Why don't you just, right? Let's just fly nice and level for a few miles. Just let's all relax. Okay. Because you almost died.
Exactly.
And I don't know what's going on in your car. Right. So anyway, after letting him relax for a bit, we turned him around to the airport and we tried the approach again. And apparently he did use the button. You could actually have a Cirrus pretty much land itself. And so that is what he did at that point. He landed at the DuPage airport without any further incidents. He then, apparently I was then on break a little later and he departed DuPage and lost control of his aircraft again. This was recounted to me by some of my coworkers. He also got very close to several O'Hare arrivals. So it, again, unsafe. Later, I followed up on it. I wanted to get information about it, and I was told I can't even get information about it because the NTSB was investigating him, and they wanted to X-ray the aircraft because the assumption was that he had damaged the airframe, right? And so that the airplane was, structurally unsafe at this point. But that was probably one of the things that shook me up the most. I mean, there's others, but that one bothered me a lot. And honestly, I'm lucky. Obviously the man's lucky. He survived, but I'm lucky in that no one's died in my career that I was actually speaking to at the time. Right. I have coworkers that they have been speaking to people who died while they're talking.
That's a trauma you have to live with for your life. That's a lot of trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've spoken to pilots that have died after talking to them, but they're gone, maybe an hour later they crash or what have you. Nothing to do with anything with me, you know what I mean? But to be involved with it directly, especially sometimes mistakes are made. You never know. I can't imagine having an accident and it be your fault, which is theoretically possible,
Then would it be wrong if I say that one of the biggest fear about your job will be to see a situation where you make a mistake that leads to somebody's death?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it would be terrible. If you work in the control tower, you're going to see it, possibly, right? People crashing on the runways. When I was in the military, I witnessed an F-16 crash on the runway where I was at. It was a huge fireball. It was one of the most incredible. It looked like something out of a movie. One of the most incredible things I've ever seen. Look, those guys survived also, luckily. Yeah. Earlier, I don't know if you want to go back to it, but earlier you asked me about the perspective of air traffic control, and I gave you the perspective from my work, and we had mentioned the perspective from the
Passengers.
So what most people don't understand when they go and they get on an airplane, a passenger airplane, right, is that the pilot is in charge of the safety of that aircraft.
Yes.
Right? But as far as speed they will fly, what heading they will take, what altitude they will fly at, they don't make a decision on any of those things. An air traffic controller will guide you from the minute you push back from parking until the minute you land and go into parking. An air traffic controller is giving an instruction to that pilot as to what to do and when to do it. And sometimes even how fast or how slow.
I have never thought about that ever.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people think it's all automated. And to some extent, there's some automation in that we live in a world of GPS now, right? So as an air traffic controller, you can put a pilot on a route, right, where they'll pretty much fly a straight line or go from this point to that point along a route. But that's en route type stuff, right? That's when you're flying at 38,000 feet and you're just cruising along. But in the climb out, right, in the descent, all of that is pretty much done by an air traffic controller. So the process would be you push back from parking. A ground controller will then taxi your aircraft, your departure to the runway, making sure they'll tell the pilot, go down this taxiway, that taxiway, whatever, miss that plane that's sitting over there, what have you. And then when you're ready to depart, a local controller will then tell the aircraft to taxi on the runway and clear them for takeoff. The local controller is responsible for the safety of the runway. Yeah. Right? They're the ones who clear the aircraft to land on the runway. They're the ones who essentially make sure the runway is clean, right? At any given moment, that there's nothing there. Even maybe a coyote, anything can be on the runway. So they're responsible for the safety of the runway. And so once you're cleared for takeoff, you're airborne now and you're climbing. As soon as you're positively climbing off of that runway, the local controller will switch you to the TRACON, which is where I would work, right? So they would switch you to a departure controller who will then climb your flight out to, who knows, depending on what airport you're at, it could be anywhere from 15,000 to maybe 23,000 feet. They'll climb you there. They'll turn you, get you on course, speed you up, get you essentially set up for that en route portion. And at that point, then that person is then, or the aircraft is then switched over to the en route portion in the en route controller, where they then finish climbing them to whatever high altitude they're going to be at. They do that. Your flight is 2 hours up there, 3 hours up there. Then the process is reversed. That person descends you down to maybe 15,000. And then again, an approach controller like myself would take over. And then we take those aircraft, and this is where it gets very, very labor intensive. So now we take the arrival, your flight, and we turn and slow the aircraft through these paces to get them in lines, right? So you want to line up each arrival depending on the situation, but let's just say 4 miles apart. going down a line onto a runway. And at a busy airport, there might be two or three or maybe even four runways that these aircraft are being lined up on. And so an air traffic controller will control exactly what speeds you're going to fly down that final. So 250 knots is pretty typical that an aircraft is flying around at, and then we will start slowing them down. Now you reduce now to 210 knots, and now reduce now to 170 knots. And we will tell them to maintain that to a specific spot. And then at about 5 miles from the airport, the pilot will switch over to the local controller again. And then that local controller in the tower, make sure the runway is clean. They clear them to land, and you land safely on the runway. You turn off of the runway, and you're given again to the ground controller, who then safely taxis the aircraft to parking and puts you in your parking. And that's the entire sequence.
That's a very busy job. It's a very busy job.
It can be. It can be extremely busy. It depends on where you work. Obviously, some places are more busy than others. But yes, at times it can be extremely busy. It can be over the top.
So let me take you now to your profession. So if someone wants to go into the ATC, air traffic control, as a career, what kind of qualifications do you think are essential for somebody?
Well, you mean as personal qualifications or education?
Education. I think education is better.
Okay, education, that's an interesting one. Now, again, this is...
US-centric. Yeah.
My answer here. So I'm not sure exactly what they're doing in Canada and elsewhere, but I can tell you there are 3 paths, essentially. You can go to college, and you can get a degree in air traffic control. And interestingly enough, there's 2-year degrees and 4 years of degrees in air traffic control. I don't know the difference between the two, but either way, you can learn it that way. And once you're done with that education, then you could be hired by the FAA, where you would be sent for training at their academy to complete that process. The other way would be like I did, where you could go into the military, and nearly all the branches of the military have some form of air traffic control. So any of them really work. I mean, I did the Air Force, which, I mean, honestly, if you really want to be an air traffic controller and you want to do it in the military, that's probably the best way to go, because you're actually going to work at an airport for sure, and work a lot of airplanes. So I did that. That's another route. So you do the military, and then you can get hired by the FAA when your military career is over. And then the third option, which is a fairly recent one, is you can be hired by the FAA with 0 experience in aviation and 0 education. So the way that works is the only requirement is 2 years of work experience at any job, which everybody has.
That's true.
Who doesn't have 2 years of work experience, right? So the way it works now, you can apply for the FAA with 2 years of work experience. They do these hirings about once a year, where you go and you take a test and you bring an application and you go through the process, and you might make it out. You might actually get hired at that point.
Okay. Now, if I have to compare the both of them, somebody without an education or who didn't go to the military but got 2 years experience in a specific industry and has switched to ATC, and somebody who has the education or went to get a degree in ATC, what, in terms of salary, in terms of job description, what could be the difference?
Okay. Yeah, there would be a little bit of an impact there. I would say the people that come out of the college, if you have a college degree, they would probably send you to the en route portion. Now, the en route portion, I haven't worked there, but the high altitude type stuff, those automatically pay more than other places, simply because all en route facilities they work a lot of airplanes because they cover so much area, right? And a en route facility covers hundreds of miles. So because of that, the pay, just for that alone, the pay is higher. And I think those jobs default to the people that have had
that's true.
And have had a degree like that. But if you were to come in, let's say off the street, you're probably more likely to be sent to, again, I could be wrong about this, but I think you're more likely to be sent to a much slower facility, like maybe a slow tower.
Yeah, to get experience
in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, right. And if you're ex-military, I think that's just random at that point. You could get sent to en route, or you could be sent to a tower or a radar facility. I mean, obviously, you generally want to send an ex-military to a tower or a radar facility because that's what they were doing.
That's correct.
When they were in the military. Yep. So it's not a huge leg up, to be honest with you. I wouldn't get the degree. I mean, to each their own. But then again, let's suppose you wanted to get into management, right? Some people just say they may not want to work airplanes for the rest of their life, and they want to be a supervisor and a manager and etc. Well, generally they want someone with
a degree, correct,
for that. And the degree for that could be anything. Honestly, it's just you could have had a degree in, I don't know, engineering, and that's enough to allow you to move up and do those stepping stones within the
I like the way it's structured in the US. I like the fact that it allows people who have military experience, people who's got college education, or people who just have experience without college education or military experience to come into the department and work in ATC. Like, I think it's very inclusive. I think it's a great idea to allow people to just come, and the pay is good. What you said, the pay is good. The job is scary, but the pay is good.
Yeah.
Right. So for someone who's starting his path or career in aviation, preferably, let me just tilt it towards ATC, traffic control. What kind of advice would you have for such a person?
Oh, all right. So the advice for someone who's thinking of doing it?
Thinking about doing it, probably, he wants to.
Yeah. I mean, I would ask yourself, are you okay with stress? Is some people handle stress, but
that's correct.
Other people. And it's not a choice, really. You either are that person or you're not. And so if you're that person whose stress doesn't bother them very much, I think it's an absolutely fine career for you. And I know this may sound very strange. I actually don't know if I should say this, but if you have undiagnosed ADHD, you probably would be very good at this job. But because you're focusing on these tasks, right? And if you can just dial in on these little tasks and do them very, very well, you'll be outstanding. But you cannot be diagnosed. And when I say that's why I say undiagnosed, because here's another thing when you talk about the medical requirements.
That part too.
Are, frankly, they're ridiculous, to be honest with you. Generally, if you have medical conditions, you can go out, you can look it up on the internet, but many, if not, there's so many medical conditions that would disqualify you from this job. It's an exhausting.
But do you think it's a good reason?
No, I don't. I don't think that at all. Now, obviously, you don't want somebody working airplanes and then falling over and dropping dead of a heart attack. So you need someone who's healthy to a certain extent, right? But, the fact that, let's take people with anxiety, for instance. So a lot of people have anxiety, right? A lot of people have depression. Yes. I don't think there's anything wrong with those people doing this job at all. Because you can be on anti-anxiety.
That's correct.
You can be on an antidepressant, and you would be an absolutely fine air traffic controller, right? But according to the FAA, you are not a fine air traffic controller, and you can't be an air traffic controller if you take these medicines. So think about what that does to a workforce. Because what if somebody is an air traffic controller for 10 years, for example, and now this is their career, and it's not like you can go, I want to go and now I want to do a different career.
Correct.
Right? You have a wife, kids, all that shit, right? You have all these things. You have a life, right? And so let's say you're 10 years as an air traffic controller, and all of a sudden you become depressed, or you develop an anxiety disorder or something like that. Well, you still have to pay the bills. Yes. Yeah. So what does this person do? Okay, I'll tell you what they end up doing. when the rubber meets the road, you don't end up taking medicine that you should probably be taking, and you don't disclose to the doctor the reality of the situation. So there are people that, unfortunately, I guarantee you, are doing this job that need help, and so they're living in the shadows. They're doing the job fine, but they have to pretend like their body is a temple and everything is perfect. When in reality, everybody has something.
Wrong. Yeah,
I mean, we're all humans. We all fall apart, and it's frankly, it's sad that the FAA and probably the military doctors also just don't support the fact that these things happen with people, and you need to be willing to work with them. But instead of saying, well, now you can't do this job anymore, and now you're fired. I disagree with that.
Yeah, it's not easy to get fired after 10 years in the job or 20. It's not. And you have a family, you have bills. It's not easy.
Yeah.
For ATC, you don't need a certification. All you just need to do is either have the military background or have an education, a degree or a diploma from any of the four walls of the university or a college, and then go through the training. That's all. You don't need some sort of professional certification. No. Oh, that's okay. All right. So now that brings me back to your podcast. Before we started recording, you talked about how you've gained a lot of experience in your job, and now you want to share that experience via podcast. So what's your podcast about?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to apologize right now to you for the name of my podcast, because you don't know it.
No, you didn't tell me that.
So, all right. So it is called, are you ready? It's called Tales from the Shift.
Tales from the Shift.
Yes. So I know that you have a play on that, right? With the logistics thing.
That's so cool. That's really cool, because just the title alone tell you that it's gonna be a whole lot of experience.
Yeah. So we're not live until October 10th. If anybody's listening to this, I do need more guests. And I'll tell you what the premise is. It is essentially, I interview people about their jobs. So, and most importantly, someone who has an interesting job. I mean, if it's a super boring job, then whatever, nobody wants to hear about it. But if it's an interesting job, let's talk. And essentially, I drill down kind of a lot of the questions you've been asking me here today as to why do you want to do this? What is this about? How did you get the job? What's it like? Tell us the secrets about what's going on there.
Yeah.
So I was at a party. The reason I do it is because I was at this party and everybody was, drunk per usual at the party. And towards the end of the night, they said, hey, let's take turns. People will go up and they'll sit in a chair in the front of the room and tell us about your career. And I thought it was fantastic.
That's a good one.
It was great. And this woman comes up there and she was from the IRS, right? From the the tax thing. Right. And so I think we asked her questions for a half hour. How do you not get in trouble? How do you not get it audited? I mean, I loved it. So that's really the premise of my podcast, Tales from the Shift. If you're interested, if anybody listening is interested in being a guest, then just email me at talesfromtheshiftpodcast@gmail.com.
You have to repeat that.
Tales from the Shift.
Say it again,
gmail.com. Yeah, Tales from the Shift podcast, gmail.com. And we'll see about getting you on the show.
Some other question will be, is there any specific industry or just a random job from a random industry?
Completely random. I have had last night I interviewed a gentleman who is a political organizer. So we went all into how politics works. The day before that, I had a man who was in strategic marketing. And I wasn't sure that was going to be interesting because I don't know anything about marketing. And I got to say, that was one of the most interesting conversations I have ever had about how marketing works, how you make products and things. But if you just contact me and we'll do it. And it is video. It's definitely a video podcast. So I have to prepare for that. But I appreciate you letting me talk about it.
Oh, it's cool. I like the fact that you're doing something like that as well.
Yeah,
Tales from the Shift.
Yeah, Yeah.
Anybody can relate with that. Like anyone can literally relate with that. That's a cool one. So you've heard about it from Shane Peterson. He is the host of Tales from the Shift, and he's got over 25 years experience in ATC, which happens to be traffic control, and we've learned a lot from him. He's told us his experiences, challenging experiences, how you could qualify to work in ATC, the pay that also comes with the job. He shared a lot of vital insights that we all can benefit from. And if you want to be in his podcast, like he said, you can send him an email and talk about it as well, about your own experience in your own job, where we all can continuously benefit from it. So, Mr. Shane, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the time. I know it's early in the morning that I have to bring you out of your bed and come talk with us.
I can't sleep. I can't sleep past about 5:30 in the morning anymore.
So what time do you go to bed?
No problem.
Okay.
About 10. Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. But I just can't. I don't know. It's getting old, I guess, kind of a thing. But it sucks. So I was going to be up regardless. I appreciate you having me on.
I really do enjoy the time I spent with you. I absolutely did enjoy it. It's an amazing time. I've learned a lot. As a passenger who really never cared about what happens at the airports, now I do care. I do care.
Yeah. Well, we're keeping you safe. I can assure you that it's a very, very safe system. Obviously things happen, but that's generally because of a lot of things that went wrong, not one thing.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But anyway, I appreciate you having me on.
So that's all for this week's episode on Tales of Logistics. We hope to see you next week.